Our underwriters for this exhibition are the Adaran Foundation, the Texas Commission on the Arts, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Wesley Washburn MD and Lulu Smith MD Endowment Fund, the C. Homer and Edith Fuller Chambers Charitable Foundation, Sheila and Jerry Reese, Kim and Roy Steinhagen, who are with us tonight, the City of Beaumont, an anonymous donor, and of course the members of AMSET. If you are not a member of the Art Museum, I would highly encourage you to join. We have our membership person over here, Kathy Hendricks, who's also a board member, who comes to every reception and sits at that table and hopes that you will join the museum. So you can join at any level, starting with $25 for a student, all the way up to $1,000 for President's Club. There's a lot of associated benefits, but the best benefit is knowing that you support this beautiful art museum and the programs that we are able to bring to you that are free. We're open 7 days a week. We are free. Admission is free. And so your membership helps support that. So please consider joining tonight. Your membership is good for 1 year. We will send you a reminder. You can also join by logging on to our website, which is www.AMSET, Art Museum of Southeast Texas.org. So please consider joining if you're not a member. And I am now going to turn it over to our curator of exhibitions, Caitlin Clay.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out for the opening reception of Margaret Smithers-Crump Kinship. I would also like to thank the exhibition underwriters. It is thanks to underwriters such as yourselves that we are able to have these wonderful exhibitions here at AMSET, free and open to the public 7 days a week. I have the honor tonight of introducing our two speakers. Margaret Smithers-Crump herself is here, as well as Volker Eisel, who is her gallery guide essayist. If you have not picked up one of our free gallery guides, looks like this, it's at the front of the galleries, then please do so after the talk or on your way out. There's a wonderful essay in there by Volker about Margaret's work. Margaret Smithers-Crump was born in Canada and has lived most of her adult life in Houston, Texas. Her work addresses the interconnectedness of the Earth's diverse life forms and ecosystems, and seeks to encourage discourse that generates new ideas and a deeper understanding about our role and collective responsibilities in an increasingly intertwined biosphere. She creates her artworks with hundreds of units of hand-cut, recycled, translucent plexiglass. Yes, it's plexiglass. And if you'd like to try and see what it feels like, we have some education activities in the Con Gallery where you can actually touch the plexiglass and make your own little Margaret Smithers-Crump inspired artwork. She also paints, shapes, and chemically joins these pieces into sculptures and site-specific installations. The glass-like quality of the semi-transparent plexiglass emphasizes the fragility of life. Her recent solo exhibitions include the Graves Museum, Abilene, Texas, the Pearl Fincher MFA at Houston, Texas, the Galveston Art Center in Galveston, Texas, the Imperial Center for the Arts, Rocky Mountain, North Carolina, Penn College of Technology at Penn State, and Manifest Art Center at Cincinnati, Ohio. Her recent gallery exhibitions include Camiba Art Gallery, Austin, Texas, and Rudolph Bloom Fine Arts, Houston, Texas. She participated and received a Houston Chronicle review for her installation at the Silos, and that piece is actually here in the exhibition. It's Code Blue, the red piece, ironically, in the back, and she'll explain why. And she holds a BFA in painting from Miami University, Oxford, Ohio. She grew up on her family's island in Canada, lived in the South Pacific in her early 20s, and eventually moved to the Gulf Coast. She has traveled to many countries, including Japan, France, Italy, Spain, Peru, Belgium, Germany, the Netherlands, Costa Rica, and Switzerland. These experiences expand her cultural education and have nurtured her respect and awe for nature. She maintains that the planet is her best educator. Please welcome Margaret Smithers-Crump. Volker Eisel is a prominent gallerist and curator from Houston, Texas. Born in Germany, he settled in Houston in 1975. He pursues professional work both as an anesthesiologist in private practice in Houston and as a gallery owner. His first gallery was in Munich, Germany, while still a medical student there. After moving to Houston, he established an anesthesiologist practice in Houston and partnered with Bill Graham at the William Graham Gallery. After Bill's untimely death in 1992, he started his own gallery in 1998 called Art Scan Gallery at the Vine Street Studios in downtown Houston. Sean Rudolph joined him as a partner 2 years later. Both Eisel and Rudolph were mainly interested in organizing conceptually oriented thematic type exhibitions. In 2003, they moved the gallery to 1836 Richmond, a gallery established in an old neighborhood house with 4 exhibition spaces. During this time, the gallery was renamed to Rudolph Bloom Fine Arts Art Scan Gallery. Eisel is also one of the founders of Sculpture Month Houston. Sculpture Month Houston is an organization that hosts a citywide festival showcasing sculpture in various venues throughout Houston, Texas. The festival directs attention to the diverse creative energies of local, regional, national, and international artists and sculptors. Please welcome Volker Eisel.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And I have to say, I'm really surprised and delighted about this show here, and I want to congratulate Caitlin here at the museum to have the courage to put on an exhibition that is so ambitious and goes a long way of explaining and pursuing a venue that is very much more or less on everybody's mind. And I have known Margaret here, or her work rather, for about 15, 20 years. And I was always surprised how she is single-mindedly working with nature, with the greatness of nature, and has then switched into basically a practice that has ecology at its core. And we'll talk about it in just a minute. It's going to be a dialogue between Margaret and me. And then in 2019, I curated a show called Outer Space. And this was a kind of a hybrid show. It is at the silos. The silos are, just briefly, don't want to bore you with it, but it's interesting in a way. Those are old, ancient rice silos. It's really an agricultural, agro-industrial ruin what it is. It rains in a little bit. There is nothing. We always say it's not the Menil. And meaning it could rain in if a tropical storm comes. On the other hand, we just suck it out and go on with it. On the other hand, the artists can more or less do what they want. They can hang, they can put nails in the wall, if they can, because it's concrete, and I believe you had some problems at the time. But so these are 34 individual spaces. They're round, cylindrical, and about 15 feet in diameter. So each artist has its own arena and can show, and it's almost like a theater performance. And all we do is basically installation art, not so much sculptures per se, but installation together. So in her case, we had 3 pieces. This, the blue, coat blue, still had to be manufactured. It was a matter of a question of balance. This one behind us, at that point it was called the
Symbiosis?
the symbiosis. And this in a round space, everything was round, and it has a swirling effect. It was referring to nature as a cyclical event, and the circular structure there has been at least some connotation to cosmic events like nebulae, galaxies, swirling structures that pivot at one point. And that, to me, was kind of a very important aspect of her art, this incredible going out into other areas, and especially, this one, cosmic connotations in that. And so this show, I was getting interested at that point in art that deals with the ecology. The title, by the way, Outer Space, came from a Van Halen song. Van Halen group, the young ones of you may be familiar with it. The song was basically stating the Earth is totally overpopulated, the economy, the environment is fouled up, we have to leave. So the Van Halen people, they packed into a rocket, put a bumper sticker on outer space, and say we're going to go and find a new habitat. And the show was a hybrid show, half of it to the left were environmental work, to the right there were artists who basically proposed a new habitat to the Van Halen people. And interestingly enough, Patrick Turk, who was here and had a show, had the shapeshifter, and that was the major piece in our show. So nicely recycled in that respect. I went on then for the next show, was called Altamira. We asked the artists to consider themselves cave artists within the round structures, and there were a number of environmental work from species that have been extinct, mammoths, woolly giant sloths, and so on. And so I got interested, and I thought at one time about the art practice, an artist who has focused on the ecology, what this would be like, and how to define it. And I think this is a hybrid kind of a art practice. On one hand, there is the narrative of the environmental destruction, of the extinction of species, the climate changes, the heating up, the problem with the CO2, too much CO2 in the atmosphere, too little in the soil. And these artists are being asked to be, in a way, activists and provocateurs in order to get that narrative out and potentially convince people to mind the environment and potentially to have a change of heart and institutional changes. Of course, once you say that in a context of the art, all of them, when you have a preordained outcome, like you want to convince somebody, that alone is not art, obviously. The press does it, the scientists do it. Art, obviously, has to have another dimension. To me, it has to transform ordinary matter into a higher level of consciousness. And once you do that, then you have a chance to affect the person you want to reach on an emotional basis. To me, art is the language of emotion and the language of feeling. And once you have that, the combination, and you fuse those two things together, the activism with the transformation and emotional charge of art, then you can effectively reach people. And that's a very unique position. This is a new role artists have basically cut out for themselves. And anyway, that has interested me then. And I want to ask you, Margaret, this is a very narrow path, of course, between, how did you manage and navigate that path between being an activist, which you are, and basically to have produced emotionally icons that emotionally valid in them?
Yeah. Well, that's an easy question to answer. As Caitlin pointed out, I was raised on a very small island in Canada, and I did live in the South Pacific. And honestly, my bedroom was a few feet from the water, so the joke was if I ever slept walk, I'd be in the lake. But it gave me such a closeness to nature that I think for human beings to be close to nature is a very important thing. And when you consider where we've come from as a species, we came from this planet. We depended on plants. We depended on animals. And I felt both on what I observed in the South Pacific and what I observed in Canada, in my own lake where I grew up, where in my lifetime I saw the lake change and become more polluted. It hurt me. And I thought, as an artist, can you hear me? I know I'm not speaking into this properly. It hurt me as an artist, and I thought, well, part of being an artist is honestly an almost selfish wanting to create, wanting to experiment, trying different materials. But the other part of being an artist is having a message, of feeling something you feel passionate about. And there's no denying I felt extremely passionate about our planet and what was happening to it. It started with endangered animals, right? I mean, in the 80s and 90s, you pick up any science magazine and you're very aware of what's happening. But honestly, what changed for me personally is my awareness into climate change, plastic in the ocean, deforestation, all kinds of things. And I just thought, well, it inspired me, and I began working with a recycled material, Plexiglas and polycarbonate, which I had a lot of access to. And it just started me on this whole trajectory. I don't know if I answered your question properly, but it's a combination of the love to create and the love to experiment with different materials, and then, just a very dedicated passion to hoping that I can, in a small way, make a change. I will say that the best art, and I don't know if I'm making the best art, but I hope the best art is transformative, that it opens a door, and that door opens other doors. And if you can do that, as an artist, you kind of feel like you're getting somewhere. And so that's been my challenge my whole life as an artist, was to open those doors. So I hope in some small way, I open some doors. Do you have another question?
Many questions. No, I'd like to hear that, and I'd like to hear about the passion you have. And so many art, very often, you mentioned that, is kind of selfish. The artist is just concerned with their own presentation, and it's always like looking into the mirror. This kind of art, and that's what has really impacted me also emotionally, is that concern about, in this case, about the environment, the narrative, and want to basically advance a narrative but in a way with the emotional impact of the art. And so artists are kind of creating works that become icons and symbols of nature. And that's another aspect. I'm going to ask you, since this is all about nature, it's very focused on it, there is a very interesting and good example historically, and these are the Romantic era painters. They have opened up to people at the time the grandeur of nature, and they painted vistas that inspired the awe of nature. And that's Caspar David Friedrich in Germany, Thomas Cole in the United States, and William Turner in England, for instance. They have really opened our eyes and our hearts to appreciate nature as in the grandiosity of the landscape. And here, the artists of today are expanding and these ideas of being awestruck and have nature in its grandiosity in a microscopic sense, and we will get to it. Margaret has unearthed incredible symbiosis, usually what they call mycorrhizal ones, between fungi and lichen, and we get to this later, and some of them you'll see here. And I think this is a very interesting kind of a pursuit where history have been pursued. Do you feel that you're in that tradition in a way? I mean, it's a big tradition.
Yeah. Yes, I do. I think in my case, I'd like to point out, just since you're all here, this gallery, the back gallery over here, really is about the ocean and what's happening to it. So the big red piece that I call code blue. Code blue, if you're in a hospital, is not a thing you want to hear, because it means that there's a dire medical situation. And so for me, the ocean, with all the plastic in it, is a dire situation. That piece, if you look carefully, has a fishnet around the entire piece, a plastic fishnet. And all of the interior of the piece is based on microscopic plankton. And plankton in the food chain for all life on the planet is how we're all here. You know, big fish eat the plankton, bigger fish eat the smaller fish, and so on. And what I am trying to do in this particular part of the gallery is have a dialogue between the pieces that open up a conversation about what's happening on our planet. There's an island the size of Texas that's plastic floating in the North Pacific. So part of that is addressing that. The piece behind it that kind of looks like coral floating down is called Speechless. It's called Speechless because, number one, coral can't talk. And if you have climate change, I believe there's a 2-degree difference in temperature on the Earth that actually affects coral bleaching. And so the piece in front of it is called Ghost Ship. And if you look at the interior, it's filled with bleached coral. So this piece, like I said, the back gallery is basically a dialogue of what's happening in our oceans. It's also a reverence and paying almost like a religious praise of water on the planet. The blue piece over here, which is called Oasis, makes a reference to our planet. We live on a blue planet. At the same time as I'm celebrating the oceans, I'm thinking about the incredible life in a single drop of water. So there is this water theme that goes throughout all the pieces. The front gallery, honestly, is dealing with more terrestrial interests. I'm very concerned about deforestation. I'm totally interested in how fungi and plants work together. I was telling a group of teenagers earlier today that, you know, maybe a plant might have a yard in which the roots fan out. A tree, of course, can fan out much larger, but I'm not sure if you know that fungi can reach out as far as 100 miles, and they can help a tree or a plant reach nutrients and water that it can have no way of contacting. So if you go into a forest and you cut down a big mother tree that helps all the other trees in the forest, you're really killing the entire forest. So what I try to do with these pieces is not so much give you a science lesson on, on fungi and plants and whatnot. I really hope what people do is they look at it and they visually explore it, and then they question, well, why did she do that? What is it that interests her? What is it that motivates her? And again, I get back to those doors that I hope to open. I do hope, selfishly, that you enjoy the art, that you get into the movement of it, the color, possibly the process of being able to take an industrial product such as Plexiglas, that I can paint on it, that I can cut it with woodshop tools, that I can heat it with a heat gun and change the shape. I do hope you get into the creative act, but I also hope that you question my inspiration, which I'm very happy to talk about, but I don't want to keep you here until midnight. So, I don't know if I answered that question, but I do feel that I am continuing on in praise of the grandeur of nature, and for me, nature is the planet. And at the same time, I'm very interested in science. And science sort of informs what I do, and then like all artists, I take off.
Very good. This basically was a great explanation about the show and its layout. And again, I'm just very obviously, being in the sciences, interested in nature in its microscopic facets that are just so outrageously complex. And if you look at it from an art standpoint, beautiful as anything our romantic painters and artists have basically opened our eyes to it and kind of ignited that wanting to feeling just as they suggested. One thing we need to we haven't clarified is the word kinship. How did that come from? Obviously, kinship, everything is related. And so, as you just heard, it is so much interrelated in nature. This time, the ocean, some of the plant, the symbiosis of the plant. And I wanted to ask you again to define that kinship ideas, because that's the central idea in your art and the scope of it.
Okay. If I leave you with any metaphor, this is the metaphor I want you to think about the most. If you can imagine our planet as a human body, just do that for a moment, and the liver or the heart is sick. In the world, in our planet, it's a body. So if one thing suffers, generally the whole thing suffers. If you have a heart condition, the whole body is affected. If there's deforestation, chances are something else is affected. If the ocean is affected, almost certainly the whole planet is affected. So, kinship to me means that everything is interconnected, that coexistence really depends on a harmony between the parts. And our species should be stewards of the planet. And I also believe, as responsible human beings, not only do we need to be stewards to the planet, but we really need to think about our children, our grandchildren, and what they are going to inherit. So it's a big picture idea, but to me, kinship means we're all related. We're not just related to each other, we're related to everything on this planet. And it's a beautiful planet we live on and very, very precious. So that's really what kinship means to me. I really hope you enjoy the exhibition. Please feel free to ask me any questions. There's an installation back there called Breaking Point. I think long and hard about my titles. I think long and hard about, where things come from. A couple of things I'd like to point out before we end this discussion. I had, again, these teenagers this afternoon ask me what the rocks were. The black rocks are anthracite, which is coal. And the reason that there's anthracite there is that anthracite at one time was a plant. It was plant under pressure and heat became coal. And the crystal forms here are called dodecahedrons because they're 12-sided, and a carbon molecule is essentially a dodecahedron. So without telling you exactly what all that means and why it relates to the piece behind me, which is about roots, plants, and fungi, the whole idea is that oftentimes we take for granted or don't understand what we see, and what I really fear is that we might even innocently destroy something before we understand it. And that's why understanding that we're a part of an interconnected whole and trying to understand those parts is so important. I really hope as an artist I can, reach some people, but I do want you to enjoy the creativity of art making, that as human beings, the fact that we can write, we can make music, we can make art, we can be scientists, we're pretty remarkable, and I just hope that this remarkable species can do more than just that we can help the planet.
I have one last question. You have invented almost a novel technique about how to deal with plexiglass and plastic. And in this context, obviously, Margaret is putting out a bunch of plastic that doesn't go into the ocean anymore. Of course, it's a minuscule amount, basically, but she has learned to use the material in such a way as almost considering a new way of making sculptures.
Right. That's an excellent question. People ask me, where did you get this material from? A while back, I owned a company called Artist Services, and we did conservation framing and conservation. And we oftentimes did large corporate collections as well as private collections. And big collections oftentimes will get rid of their plexiglass because it's scratched or what have you. And so I would not let it go in the landfill or in the ocean. And I began wondering what I could do with it. So I initially sanded it, discovered that I could paint on it, draw on it. I then moved to woodshop tools like routers, bandsaws, Dremel tools, what have you. and it's been a remarkable material. It is recycled. I'm able to use heat guns to change the shape. I'm able to cut it out into very fine forms. So over, I think, pretty close to 25 years now, I've been working with recycled plexiglass, and it's been very remarkable because just when I think I've ended all the things I could do with it, new things happen and I discover something else.
Thank you. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, public. You have any questions, you can ask us.
I was just wondering how the plexiglass is it's almost like a contradiction. These things look very fragile, but plastic is not. So I think that's a testament to the work that it has this thing. How are these attached to each other? On some of these things, how fragile are they in reality?
The pieces, yes and no, are fragile and not fragile. I use two kinds of plastic. I use plexiglass and polycarbonate. Polycarbonate is very elastic. It's what you find in your airplane windows. So I could not cut straight plexiglass into these fine shapes. It would probably break, but I can cut polycarbonate. And polycarbonate is used a lot in framing artwork because it doesn't break. To be really honest with you, sometimes with really fragile pieces, I do encounter breakage, but I can always repair it. How do you connect plexiglass to plexiglass or polycarbonate to polycarbonate? There is a chemical bonding agent that puts the molecules into solution. It's kind of like welding. So with a clamp and with the chemical bonding agent, I can cut out shapes, clamp them together, and they bond. The more fragile the shape, the more precarious it gets, but I can always repair. If you counter that to someone who works with glass, if the glass breaks, it's not good. In my case, I rarely have something where I cannot repair it. Did that answer your question? Okay. Does anyone else have any questions about the material? Because I get lots of questions about, like, how do you cut it? How do you, what media can you paint on it with? How do you get it to stick? That sort of thing. And I get questions about plexiglass as in, this is a good question, how long will it last? You know, because plastics have a bad rap. But I will tell you that plexiglass will last hundreds of years, and I use an archival plexiglass mostly that will last a very long time. Any other questions?
Thank you very much. Thank you, our hosts here, and I really enjoyed a wonderful exhibition.
Please give it up for Volker and